If you've ever stayed awake until 2 in the morning replaying something that happened months ago, you already know how convincing your own thoughts can be. You remember a presentation where you stumbled over a sentence, a joke that nobody laughed at, or an awkward interaction with someone you barely know. Chances are, the other person forgot about it the same day, but your brain didn't. It stored the moment like an unsolved mystery, bringing it back every so often as if there were still something left to figure out. What's fascinating is that overthinkers don't just remember events, they edit them. They replay them from different angles, imagine what they should have said, predict how other people interpreted them, and mentally rewrite the ending. Unfortunately, no amount of replaying changes what actually happened. Many people think overthinking is simply a sign of anxiety or insecurity, but that's only part of the story. Some of the biggest overthinkers are also some of the most analytical people. They're naturally curious, observant, and constantly looking for patterns. The same qualities that help them solve difficult problems can also make it incredibly hard to stop thinking. Their brains don't settle for the first explanation. They immediately start looking for a second, a third, and a fourth. That's why intelligent people often find themselves trapped in endless mental loops, not because they're smarter than everyone else, but because their minds generate more possibilities. When someone else sees one explanation, they see 5. When someone else makes a quick decision, they imagine every possible consequence before taking a single step. This ability is incredibly valuable in the right situations, but when it's applied to everyday life, it can become exhausting. The reason this happens has a lot to do with how our brains evolved. Your brain's primary job isn't to make you happy, it's to keep you alive. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors survived by anticipating danger before it happened. If they heard something moving in the bushes, assuming it might be a predator was safer than ignoring it. Although our lives are very different today, our brains still work in much the same way. Instead of worrying about wild animals, we worry about job interviews, relationships, money, career choices, and what other people think about us. Whenever something feels uncertain, your brain automatically tries to solve it. One part of the brain becomes alert to potential threats, while another starts analyzing every possible explanation. Usually, this is helpful. It allows us to plan ahead, avoid mistakes, and solve complex problems. But when there isn't enough information to reach a clear answer, the brain keeps searching anyway. It starts replaying conversations, imagining future scenarios, and asking endless what-if questions, hoping the next thought will finally provide certainty. The problem is that certainty isn't always possible. This is where it's important to understand the difference between thinking and overthinking. Thinking moves you toward a solution. Overthinking keeps you circling around the same problem without making progress. Psychologists often call this rumination. Imagine watching the same movie every night for a week. No matter how many times you watch it, the ending never changes. That's exactly what rumination does. You replay the same conversation, the same mistake, or the same decision over and over again, but you don't gain any new insight. Your brain feels busy, but it isn't actually moving forward. That doesn't mean overthinking is always bad. In fact, some of humanity's greatest achievements came from people who thought deeply. Scientists spend years questioning assumptions before making discoveries. Engineers carefully analyze every detail before designing bridges or airplanes. Doctors consider multiple possibilities before making a diagnosis. Entrepreneurs think through risks before investing millions of dollars. In these situations, careful thinking prevents mistakes and leads to better outcomes. Deep thinking is a strength when it helps you make informed decisions. The problem begins when your brain starts treating every situation as if it were a life or death decision. Suddenly, choosing what to say in a text message feels as important as signing a business contract. You spend 20 minutes rewriting an email that was perfectly fine the first time. You avoid applying for a job because you're worried you aren't qualified enough. You hesitate to start a YouTube channel because you're convinced everything has to be perfect before you begin. Instead of helping you succeed, your intelligence starts working against you. Over time, this habit slowly chips away at your confidence. Confidence doesn't come from always making perfect decisions. It comes from trusting yourself enough to make a decision even when the outcome is uncertain. The more you delay action in search of the perfect answer, the more your brain learns that uncertainty is something to fear. Eventually, even simple choices begin to feel overwhelming. So, how do you stop overthinking without becoming careless? The answer isn't to stop thinking altogether. The goal is to think effectively and know when it's time to move on. Here are 5 practical strategies that can help. Number 1, stop trying to eliminate uncertainty. Most people think they overthink because they don't have enough information. In reality, they overthink because they're trying to become 100% certain before taking action. The truth is, certainty doesn't exist. Whether it's applying for a job, asking someone out, starting a business, or making an important decision, there will always be unknowns. Here's something to try the next time you're stuck in your head. Ask yourself, am I trying to solve a problem, or am I trying to eliminate uncertainty? Those are 2 very different things. Solving a problem leads to action. Trying to eliminate uncertainty leads to endless thinking. Once you've gathered enough information to make a reasonable decision, accept that the rest can only be learned by taking the next step. Remember, confidence doesn't come from knowing what will happen. It comes from learning that you can handle whatever happens. 2, give your brain a decision deadline. Overthinkers often believe that thinking longer will lead to a better decision. Sometimes that's true, but only up to a point. After that, you're simply going in circles. The next time you're making a decision, give yourself a deadline. Maybe it's 10 minutes for something small, or 2 days for something bigger. During that time, gather information, weigh the pros and cons, and think carefully. But when the deadline arrives, make the decision and move forward. Every time you honor that deadline, you're teaching your brain something important. I trust myself enough to decide. Over time, that trust grows into confidence. 3, challenge the story your mind is creating. Your brain is incredibly good at filling in missing information, but it usually fills it with the worst-case scenario. Someone replies late? They must be upset. Your boss wants to talk? You're probably in trouble. Your friend seems quiet? Maybe they're angry with you. Before believing those thoughts, pause and ask yourself 3 questions. What evidence do I actually have? Is there another explanation that's just as likely? If my best friend were in this situation, what would I tell them? Most of the time, you'll realize your brain isn't responding to facts. It's responding to assumptions. Learning to question those assumptions is one of the fastest ways to break the cycle of overthinking. 4, replace thinking with action. This is probably the hardest strategy, but it's also the most powerful. Overthinking creates the illusion that you're making progress because your brain is busy. But thinking isn't the same as moving forward. So whenever you catch yourself stuck in analysis, ask, what's the smallest action I can take right now? If you're worried about applying for a job, submit 1 application. If you're nervous about starting a project, work on it for just 10 minutes. If you're overthinking a conversation, send the message instead of rewriting it for the 20th time. Action gives your brain real information. Overthinking only creates imaginary information. The more you act, the less your mind needs to guess. 5, train yourself to return to the present. Overthinking almost always lives in one of 2 places, the past or the future. You're either replaying something that already happened or worrying about something that hasn't happened yet. The next time you notice yourself spiraling, interrupt it deliberately. Put your phone down. Take 1 slow breath. Look around the room and name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This simple grounding exercise reminds your brain that right now, you're safe. It shifts your attention away from imagined scenarios and back to reality. The more often you practice returning to the present, the easier it becomes to stop your thoughts before they snowball into hours of unnecessary worry. Finally, practice bringing your attention back to the present. Most overthinking happens in the past or the future. You're either replaying something that already happened or worrying about something that hasn't happened yet. Very little overthinking happens in the present moment. Simple habits like focusing on your breathing, paying attention to your surroundings, or taking a short walk without your phone can interrupt these mental loops and remind your brain that right now, you're safe. At the end of the day, your intelligence isn't the problem. In fact, it's one of your greatest strengths. The ability to think deeply, notice patterns, and anticipate future outcomes has helped humanity achieve incredible things. But every strength becomes a weakness when it's used at the wrong time. You don't need to analyze every conversation, predict every possible outcome, or eliminate every uncertainty before taking action. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do isn't to think harder. It's to trust yourself enough to move forward. So the next time you catch yourself replaying the same conversation, worrying about something that hasn't happened, or searching for the perfect decision, pause and ask yourself one question. Have I already thought enough? If the answer is yes, then maybe your next step isn't another hour of thinking. Maybe it's taking action. Because life isn't lived inside your head. It's lived in the choices you make once you finally step outside of it. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing for more content on psychology, neuroscience, and practical ways to understand your mind a little better. And remember, your goal isn't to have fewer thoughts. It's to stop letting unnecessary thoughts control the way you live.